Pesachim Daf, Ein Dalet. Today's email comes from David Goldberg, an accountant in London. I'm going to skip around there. He says, I really enjoy the banter and the lively way you present the shir. You don't see me on Zoom because I listen to YouTube a couple of hours after the live shir. I'd like to make a shout out to my former partner, Rabbi Yaakov Schoenberg, who's part of your shir. He's not just part of the shir, he's a major part of the shir, and was a very popular partner in our accountancy practice here in London. And he's a very, very popular Talmud Chacham here in Ramah Bet Shemesh. In fact, my colleague, Dov Harris, I know is part of your Chabura, a number of other partners. A shout out to Baruch Brennig, Baruch Lee, Asher Sternlich, and our semi-retired consultant Noach Schwartz. They're all doing the daf. Gevaldik, Chelchem Le'iraisa. Brand new Perek. Keitzat Soilim. What is the procedure one does in order to roast the Korban Pesach? You take a spit, a skewer made out of pomegranate wood only, you put it through the mouth, and it comes out the rear of the animal. You cannot use other types of wood like palm tree and fig tree because they have moisture, and the Torah says tzli must be roasted, not cooked. Oak, carob, sycamore, they have knots in them, and when you remove the knot, in order to make a nice smooth spit, you open up the branch and out oozes moisture. But where it comes to a pomegranate, the knots that a pomegranate has are not necessary to smooth out. Or we're talking about a pomegranate that's less than a year old, doesn't have knots. When you cut a branch, that place that you cut it is going to let out moisture, so you must be careful not to have that place next to the animal. You cannot use a metal spit, a metal skewer, because when the metal touches the fire, it conducts heat, and the heat goes through the metal, and the metal, in fact, is helping cook the animal, and it has to be tzli eish, it has to be from the fire and not from metal. Rabbi Yehuda argues, you shouldn't put the animal over a grill. Rabbi Gamliel told Tavi, his famous Eved, who was a Talmud Chacham and a kosher, told him, you grill it, you take the Korban Pesach, roast it over the grill. Rabbi Yossi says you take the legs and the bnei ma'ayim, the intestines, and you put it inside the cavity of the animal. That's how you roast it. Says Rabbi Kiva, but that's cooking. So you have to take the intestines and the legs, you put it on the outside of the animal by its head. Rabbi Shmuel, who held, like Rabbi Yossi that you put it inside the animal, he called it a tuch tuch. It made a sound of boiling. Rabbi Tarfon, who says, like Rabbi Kiva, you put it on the outside of the animal, he called it gedimakulas. It's a goat that has a helmet. It looked like a helmet. In our days, in the time of the Gemara at least, it's usher to eat a roasted gdi, but that is when it's complete and whole. But if you cut one limb and you roasted it, or you cooked it, even if it's attached to the animal, you cooked it as is, it's mutter, as long as one limb was cooked, even though the rest is roasted. Rava says there's something called muyasa. It's a stuffed animal. You stuff it with meat. Now the issue is the meat that you stuffed it in. The halacha is if there's blood in meat, you're allowed to eat it. But if the blood leaves the meat and goes into another piece of meat, then it's usher. So over here, we're concerned that the blood from the stuffing will go into the cavity of the animal. And the Gemara says, what causes the blood to leave the stuffing? The heat. That heat will continue to make that blood leave the animal completely. The Gemara says, don't bring a raya that you can take the innards and the legs and put it inside the animal, and we're not concerned of the blood that comes out of the innards and everything. That's because the Korban Pesach is flipped over, the head is downwards, the incision from the shechita is open, and all the blood drains through that incision. There's also halacha when it comes to a heart. You have to cut it open and take out the blood from the heart. Now, what if you cook it? What if you didn't cook it? You're allowed to cut it open and take out the blood. But what about the concern of kabayla kachpalta? Aren't you concerned that it absorbs blood during the cooking? And the answer is a heart does not absorb blood because it's very smooth, and the material it's made out of it doesn't absorb blood. Now, in the time of the Gemara, if you breaded meat with silas, which is fine, not necessarily thin, but very good quality flour that's very thick and it doesn't absorb blood, we're not concerned that it would absorb blood. But if it's made out of white flour, if the juices that come out are clear like white glass, then it's mutter. Other flours, if they turn red, they are usher. La halacha, mulyasa, is mutter to eat even if the mouth of the animal, the incision of the shechita, is on top. And according to the Mandama, it says that it's usher even if the mouth is facing downwards. There's three halachas. You have a piece of meat that has blood from one of the veins. You have the beitzim of this animal, and you have a major artery. These are all pieces of meat that have blood that it's usher to eat. So what you do is you cut it, you salt it, and then it's permitted to cook. If you put it on a skewer, it's mutter because the blood just comes right off. Major artery. You need that the mouth of the animal should be downwards on the skewer. If you have blood that came out of a major artery onto the meat, as we said before, then we know that it's going to drip out and it's not a problem. On top of coals, putting the meat on top of a coal. Ravacha and Ravina had a machloikis, and wherever those two had a machloikis, we always paskin lekula. In these three cases, the halacha is like Ravacha lekula, and therefore, when it comes to coals, there's machloikis whether the coals make the animal shrivel up and retain the blood, or they make the blood leave. Ravacha says it makes the blood leave, and that's how we paskin. If the meat became red because of the blood, the juice that comes out and it becomes red is asur. Ravina said, even if it doesn't become red, it's impossible. There's not a little bit of blood in it, so the juice is asur. Ravina said, Amemar said, and some say Ravashi said, he himself used to drink the juices. You take vinegar and you dip the meat in the vinegar in order to remove the blood. Once you do it once, you can't use it a second time because the vinegar becomes weak. Yet, if you take a weak vinegar that never was used for this procedure, it's mutter to use, even though it's weak. The reason is because it still has some of the wine in it, and that's able to remove the blood. Have a wonderful day.